This week, we conclude reading the book of Numbers, and we embark on the final book of the Torah, Deuteronomy, our fifth and final book. It begins by stating, "These are the words that Moses addressed to all Israel on the other side of the Jordan." The Hebrew name for Deuteronomy, Devarim, literally means words, and this framing sets the entire book apart from the rest of the Torah. In summation by Rabbi Max Chaikin, he writes, "The opening words of Deuteronomy always remind us that the Torah has a sense of humor. In the previous 3 books, everything we have seen and heard about Moses has been in the third person. But here, Moses speaks for himself. The humor comes from what we know about Moses. In his encounter with God at the burning bush, the reluctant prophet needed serious convincing that he was the right man for the job. He pleaded with the Eternal One in Exodus chapter 4, verse 10, "I have never been good with words, either in times past or now that you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." And now here Moses stands 40 years later, ready to speak an entire book called Words, including its first portion, which is also called Devarim. After 40 years in the desert, Moses has found his voice. Tonight, we will hear from someone who found her voice through her journey to Judaism, and who will teach us tonight about the importance of speaking up for others and the price of our silence. I welcome to the Bema, Jocelyn Harper.
Your check's in the mail, that was good.
My check's in the mail, she said.
That was good. All right. Yeah. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Yeah. So I know you came here for a little feel-good conversion story, and I promise we'll get there. But I promised Rabbi Brown that we'll do Torah learning today. I wouldn't be a very good fill-in if I didn't get to that first. So today's portion is, or the portion for the week, rather, is Matot Maseh. And in a nutshell, it involves Moses reviewing the rules and laws in regards to making vows or promises for us as a tribal community. So to start with, first of all, can you hear me with this on my face? Yes. Okay, just making sure. I read a commentary on this portion from, hold on one second, because this is not going to work. Okay, all right, sorry about that. I read a commentary on this portion from Brad Artson in which he highlighted a very important rule that Moses laid out for Bnei Israel concerning making vows or promises. So the rule is the rule of ascent, obviously, and not ascent in the sense of ascending or going up somewhere, but ascent as A-S-S-E-N-T, which is the opposite of descent, but we'll get there, or dissent, rather. So when making vows, a spouse could nullify another spouse's vows, but only in the moment. And if the moment passed, the spouse could not do so and was considered to be in agreement with the other spouse. That is what the rule of assent means. We are most familiar with its antonym, which is dissent, or to show disagreement. So this works, for example, I'm going to pick on somebody really quick. So let's say we have Mike and Peggy, okay? So if Mike's wife, Peggy, makes a vow that says, "I'm going to spend $50,000 on shoes this month." Sounds like a great idea, right? But yeah, it does, right? So Mike has, in this moment, only this time to express his dissent or disagreement. Otherwise, the agreement stands if he is silent. Sounds good, right, Mike? Yeah? No? Okay. So you might ask me, why would I bring up something that is kind of weird, and if we're being honest, it's a little bit misogynist, yes? So let me first go on the record as saying I don't believe that a man's word holds more weight than a woman's. But the idea of assent in silence has implications for our everyday lives on this planet. Because believe it or not, we live in a world in which we are constantly taking in vows or pieces of information and deciding whether or not we agree. In his 2021 commentary, Rabbi Artson asks, how often do we face acts of injustice or callousness with silence? A derogatory joke in our presence, an act of selfishness or cruelty, or simply reading of political oppression in our newspapers. All of these instances summon us to choose a side. We can either verbalize our opposition, or immediately, or through our silence, we become allies of the act or words we abhor. There is no neutrality, and silence is assent. In other words, what we permit, friends, is what we promote. So, my journey to Judaism began with just that, a realization back in early 2018 and 2019 that a life spent in a religious environment paying lip service to the idea of a loving God while continuing to co-sign rhetoric that denied not only my own humanity and worthlessness as queer Black woman was not only permitting but also promoting hatred. I could dissent, of course, or I could continue to show my assent with silence and compliance. Well, the end of 2019 and the rise of the pandemic for all of its chaos provided a convenient exit from my previous religious environment. Religious environment's closed. I can't go to it, right? I took a few months to examine my own core beliefs, what mattered to me, what I wanted to be known for speaking on at the end of my life, and that reflection actually led me to considering Judaism. I actually joke that the scariest phone call that I ever made was the one I made to this very synagogue in January of 2021, because I was used to being silent, compliant, and docile, and just following what I always knew, right? Because that's what we do. And I, on some level, credit Judaism for helping me find my voice. So that's the cute part, right? The part where we all clap, and you can clap if you want to, and say, and say, aw, oh my God, like you can give it a good aw because it's a very cute story. And don't get me wrong, I love a good conversion story myself, but if I did not bring this back to Torah, I would not be a very good stand-in for Rabbi Brown, so here it goes. So at any moment, as humans, we are faced with all kinds of vows and promises. Politicians promise to decimate our access to reproductive health care. Racists promote that this joke is totally fine because I have Black friends. And still more politicians promise to end same-sex marriage and repeal protections for trans youth, among other things. We aren't always in a position to change the laws, friends. We may not even always be in a position that will bring about change in the heart of someone who is racist or otherwise bigoted or homophobic, but make no mistake, we are always in the position to stand up or speak for someone else, lest we let our silence speak for us. So maybe you are, like me, in agreement, of course, but not sure how to speak up. Start where you are. It could be something as simple as reaching out to your representative to express your displeasure at oppressive policy, which I'm really good at, so you can always let me know if you need pointers or coaching, or as small as being the lone dissenter in a workplace discussion that disparages women or people of color or some other marginalized group. Most timely, though, finding your voice also means being the one, particularly if you're someone who sits in a place of privilege, being the one to look around your schools, your workplace, and even your own synagogue and ask the hard questions. Whose perspective is being centered here? Is it the perspective of people who look just like me? And most importantly, whose voice is missing from this space? This is not an easy thing to do, of course, but as we read in our liturgy at the beginning of service, life asks us, or our week and our difficulties ask us if we should draw back or draw forward in the face of difficult discussions, hard questions, and troublesome vows. I think we know the answer, and it's only by speaking up and using your collective voice for good and your privilege for good that forward progress is made. Shabbat Shalom.